Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hello and welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. Today we radiate appreciation with Rita Marie Johnson, who is the founder and creator of the Connection Practice. The Connection Practice is a wonderful modality to form understanding and empathy between people and to help us just open up our hearts and be coherent with the people around us. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rita Marie.
I'm happy to be here, Christy. You know, I love to speak about my passion.
You do. You have been doing it for a while now, the Connection Practice. So full disclosure, I've taken this Connection Practice class and I found it to be a really powerful and helpful tool to actually practice empathy. You know, empathy has been under scrutiny lately. I don't know why, as an undesirable quality. But this Connection Practice, now, before we get too much further, can you tell us just in a few words, like what the Connection Practice is and how it helps us achieve this empathy?
Let's begin, Christy, with a definition of the word connection in the way that we understand it in the Connection Practice. We see it as a state of being that emerges when we feel safe and know we matter. Then we feel connected to ourselves. And we can also radiate that to other people so that it's a quality that we bring to relationships where others in our lives feel they are safe and that they matter. So that's sort of the foundation of what we teach. Then how do we get there? The way we get there is we combine empathy and insight. So our tagline actually is empathy plus insight equals connection. So the way we do that, we get to empathy by using the vocabulary of feelings and needs. So in the Connection Practice, feelings are simply messengers that point to a perception that we've had of either met needs or unmet needs. And then after we achieve that self-empathy by connecting to our own feelings and needs, if we're having problem with someone, then what we do is we respectfully guess, what might they be feeling? What might they be needing? Right. And so that is the way that we put ourselves in somebody else's shoes by what we call respectful guessing of feelings and needs. But then the second step is equally important, and that is getting to an insight. Because once we identify our own main need, and we guess what the other person's main need might be. And then we move into what's called heart-brain coherence. And we know that when we're in that state, that then we can access our best thinking. So when we have a challenge in life, our heads are spinning and our emotions are churning, and we call that disconnection. But when we're able to get to self-empathy, empathy for the other person, and then move into heart-brain coherence, then we are able to get completely connected so that we can hear our best thinking. So we move into this state, which is actually measurable by an app that measures a heart-brain coherence. And so we learn how to do it through biofeedback. Anyway, once we move into heart-brain coherence, then we ask ourselves, what do I need to know about this situation? And we listen inside for an insight. And normally one will come right out, in just a few minutes, we've got an insight that helps us then know the last step, which is our action. What is going to come from empathy and insight? What action is going to emerge from what we have gotten connected to? So that's the essence of the steps of the Connection Practice.
And when you mention this heart-brain coherence, that sounds an awful lot like HeartMath Institute, Greg Braden's work.
Yes, actually, the HeartMath Institute is one of our partners from day one. Actually, I learned heart math before I created any of this, and they have supported my work all these years. They've allowed me to take their basic technique, which is called quick coherence, and the 3 steps of that are heart focus, heart breathing, and heart feeling of appreciation. And so we have integrated that step into the connection practice with their wholehearted permission. And so, yes, heart math is considered one of the parents of the connection practice, and we've had a wonderful relationship all these years.
Oh, that's wonderful. I just love Greg Braden's work. It's very accessible. It's very easy to understand, as is the connection practice, very accessible and very easy to understand. Now, how did you get from taking Greg Braden's, heart math programs to the connection practice? How did you develop this connection practice?
Well, I've always wanted to be a peacemaker since I was 10 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was always seeking the way, because some of the models of being a peacemaker didn't appeal to me. Let's just put it that way. For me, I needed to know how to get to peace myself, and then maybe I could be a peacemaker in the world. That was sort of my theory. Let's figure it out. I'm a Missouri girl, from the show me state. And so for me, it has to be practical. I have to understand. I have to be able to live it, do it. So I went on that quest, and in that quest, I first discovered heart math. And then after that, I was much more able to be centered, to access my best thinking. However, if someone was sort of rude to me, or if there was a conflict, I didn't have the language. I didn't really know how to respond. So I knew there was a piece missing. So I took a course on nonviolent communication from Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. And after taking that course, I came back here to Costa Rica, which is where I am today. And I was laying on the couch in the other room, and I was going over in my mind my experience at the nonviolent communication course, where I had actually first combined the coherence of heart math with the learning of nonviolent communication, because I found what they call NVC, nonviolent communication is NVC. I found it kind of heady. I found it a little difficult for it to flow, that my be perfect driver in my head was always monitoring every word that came out of my mouth. And so that made it really hard to learn, because I was getting in my own way. And so I thought, well, I'll just get coherent. I'll get my heart and brain in sync here, and then hopefully the words will flow. So that's what I discovered during the nonviolent communication course. And when I was laying on the couch here, I was just sort of mulling all out over, and suddenly it dawned on me, wow, if I took the essence of heart math, which is coherence, and I took the essence of nonviolent communication, which is being able to identify our feelings and needs, and if I could get to insight with heart math and empathy with nonviolent communication, what would happen if I combine those two? It's like they need each other. Just like knowing coherence wasn't enough for me. I had to find the language, and I had to know how to get to empathy. And so in combining those two, I thought, wow, I could be confident responding to any challenge life brings me. If I can combine those, I think there's a synergy there. And so it was a huge aha. I actually got up off the couch and I went, oh my gosh, this realization is going to change my life. I actually put my hand over my mouth. I remember going, oh my God, this is going to change my life. And I was a little bit nervous about that. That's like, am I ready for that? Anyway, so yeah, after that moment, I pursued that. I started trying combining the two. And heart math is a rich methodology. It's not just the quick coherence technique that I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's not just heart focus, heart breathing, heart feeling of appreciation. They have a rich methodology, but we don't use all that. We just use the essence. And same with nonviolent communication. It's a rich methodology. And Marshall Rosenberg, what a wonderful man, he allowed us to use just the essence of NVC. So nonviolent communications are other parent of the connection practice. So anyway, when it all came together and I realized what it could do for me, and if I could get it to work for me, then maybe I could teach it to others. And so I started down that path, and I was fortunate here in Costa Rica that I got the support of two different presidents of Costa Rica, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, President Oscar Arias, and the president that followed him, President Laura Chinchilla, both supported our program to be launched into the public school system. So I had a really strong start for trying this out. And now we have taught over 100,000 adults and children in over 20 countries.
It's amazing. Well, and when we're talking about empathy, it's a big concept to teach empathy. Like, how can you teach understanding what other people feel? But the connection practice does that, right? And you describe it as guessing. I would describe it maybe as curiosity and getting outside of my box to think, okay, beyond what my feelings are, what could another person be feeling? And that is a very tangible way to look at it, I think.
Exactly. And not only feelings, but needs. You see, in the connection practice, we honor our feelings. We don't want to be suppressing our feelings. We don't want to express our feelings in hurtful ways, but we see them as messengers pointing to a universal need. Needs like consideration, respect, emotional safety, physical safety. And so we have actually boards that we use. They are magnetic in one form, which is the form I love the most. It's tactile. So we move these magnets of feelings and magnets of needs over to another board that has the whole practice on it. And so that's a fabulous way to do the connection practice, because all the feelings and the needs, well, not all of them, you can only put so many on the magnets on this board, but we can always add more with our erasable markers. Anyway, bottom line is we help people with the feelings and needs language, because most of us have a huge deficit of feelings and needs language. We don't know how to identify a feeling and then go on the search for the unmet need under that negative feeling, or the met need under a positive feeling. None of us were taught that as kids. And it takes some doing to, make that a practice, to really embody that in our own lives and be able to live from it, to live from a state of connection.
Absolutely. To just train our minds in a way to be thinking about that. So this really does serve a huge need for humanity. And I know that there are challenges that this connection practice wants to resolve. Besides empathy, what are some other things that you hope to resolve with the connection practice?
Well, Christy, I don't know if you've heard about the largest study of global emotional intelligence ever. It's called The State of the Heart, came out in 2024. And it's amazing in what it reveals. So it shows that emotional intelligence around the world has declined over the last 4 years. It shows that well-being has declined over the last 4 years. And then we also know that burnout in 65% of the workplace sectors has increased, and loneliness has increased. 1 in 5 individuals in the United States experiences daily loneliness. So when it comes to what we're aiming to do, when we see people around the world are experiencing low well-being, loneliness, burnout, and declining emotional intelligence, there's a huge need for support. And the problem is many people can't afford support, and there's truly not enough professionals to provide it for everyone. And so we need a mainstream approach that empowers every individual to resolve emotional turmoil on their own, something that's really efficient and effective that each individual can learn. And so the connection practice achieves that with our synergistic combination of empathy and insight. It's science-based, and everybody can learn it. And it basically transforms confusion into clarity and conflict into connection.
Yeah. Well, I have 2 questions. Now, you referenced this study. Is that worldwide, or is it just the United States?
Worldwide. It's a network of nonprofits that research emotional intelligence. And so they did this study together of emotional intelligence in the world. And this is what they found. Really sad results.
Yes. Well, because I asked about worldwide because the United States keeps ranking lower and lower and lower on the happiness index.
Right.
And other countries such as Denmark, Sweden, Bhutan are all at the very top. So even across the quote unquote happiest nations, this is a finding?
Well, I'd have to go into the specifics of every country to be able to tell you that. But for example, Costa Rica has several times been named the happiest country in the world.
Wow.
And that's one reason I'm here, because Costa Rica is the only country in the world with no army.
Yeah.
And they also have no defense arrangement with a larger country. And Costa Rica taught me to put connection first. Costa Ricans are all about connection, and outcome is secondary. They get things done, but getting things done is not the primary driver in the Costa Rican consciousness. It's connection. And they taught me that. I moved here in 93, and I have learned so much from them. And I love living in Costa Rica for that reason.
I'm sure. My other big question was, you mentioned the empathy and insight. And how does the connection practice combine this empathy and insight?
Well, maybe I can just give you an example, a little story, a short story of how it works. So a few years ago, our nonprofit had a situation with another nonprofit, an agreement that we had to figure out if we were going to renew it or what we were going to do with this agreement we'd had. And I had a meeting with one of their leaders, and he said to me, "Your work won't go anywhere without us." And in that situation, I was taken aback, and the conversation didn't go any better after that, really, although I listened a lot to him. So after this sort of uncomfortable conversation, trying to come up with some kind of new agreement, we had to set a time for a second meeting. And I knew I needed to do my connection practice. So I took that challenge. This is where we begin, Christy, as we get clear on when the negative feelings started. So that was when he said to me that your work won't go anywhere without us. And then I identified my feelings, I identified my needs, and I came up with my main need being emotional safety. And then I respectfully guessed his feelings and his needs, and I guessed that his main need might be to matter. There were several red flags in our conversation that to me suddenly pointed to the fact that this was a wounded man who didn't know he mattered. And so then my next step was to move into this heart-brain coherence that we've been talking about. So my next step was to go down into my heart. I focused down in my heart. I was breathing as if breathing through my heart, and then feeling appreciation. And then I asked myself, what do I need to know? And what came up were the words, less is more. And that was a surprise to me. I didn't know what that meant at first, but I realized in preparing for the second meeting, I had too much on the agenda. And so when I thought about less is more, I thought, I'll get it down to one request. So now I was ready. I went to our second meeting. And in the second meeting, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to just give this man empathy. And every time he said something negative, I was going to come back guessing his feelings and needs without him realizing what I was doing. I could do it in a way that wouldn't be weird. Let's just put it that way. And so by doing that, the two of us got connected. I came to my one request, and he said, "Oh, sure, we can do that, and we can do this, and we can do this." And so we got through that meeting with me getting my need for emotional safety met. He got his need to matter met, and we both made progress. So that's how the connection practice works in real life to resolve conflicts. Now, we also use it, Christy, to resolve inner conflicts. Not everything that goes on in this heart of ours is about another human being. We might have negative mind talk. We might be facing some financial challenge that doesn't have to do with anybody else, or maybe illness or whatever. So we also use it for inner issues.
Right, true, to resolve conflict within ourselves and to connect.
Exactly.
Right. And that point of appreciation I think is important because it is heart opening to fall into appreciation. I mean, it's like the highest vibration we can experience, appreciation, joy, gratitude, right? So that
Absolutely.
part. So I can see how this connection practice would help us achieve that coherence within ourselves and then also with other people. Now, and you mentioned teaching it in schools, at least in Costa Rica, but this catching in other schools as well. How is it done in schools? Do they teach the class? Is it just like for one-on-one conflict? Like, how do they do that? I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would like to ask you a few simple favors. First of all, please rate, review, and share this podcast wherever you're listening. You know, it sounds like a simple little thing, and it is, but it has a huge impact for us because it helps other people find us in the podcasting algorithms. I don't know how it works, but I do know that it helps a lot. Next, if you would subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you're listening, just hit subscribe or follow, and that helps you and it helps us. It helps you because then you receive notifications when we have a new episode that's out. It helps us because, again, algorithm magic, I don't know what happens, but it helps. And then finally, you can support our podcast in a tangible way by going to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast and then click on support the show. Now, we have a new feature too. We are now on Patreon. You can find us on Patreon. You can also find the link to Patreon when you go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast. So on Patreon for $3 a month or $5 a month, you can support your metaphysical and spiritual growth. You can learn about upcoming guests and you can get early and ad-free versions of the shows. So please support us. This podcast is free for you to listen, but we have costs and quite frankly, they come out of my pocket. So if you like this content, if you get a lot out of it, please see what you can do to give back. Thank you so much.
No, we can teach a whole classroom. We can teach the teacher. When teachers take training with us, they become what we call children and youth instructors. And that means that they have learned the curriculum. They have done it themselves. They have experienced the shift from negative feelings into their best thinking. And so they can do it themselves. And then they learn our curriculum, which is a 6-lesson curriculum. It's not some year-long thing because it's experiential. You know, we give the kids the experience of being able to release negative feelings efficiently and get to their best thinking. And so we have done this in schools in a variety of countries, especially in the United States and Japan. We have a lot of children and youth instructors in Japan. We have about 100 trainers in Japan right now. But we also are working in the United States. For example, we did a pilot project a few years back in 2020, which, if you remember, was the year of COVID.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
okay. So this is amazing, Christy, because we started this pilot project at the beginning of the school year. It was with the Craigmont Elementary School in Berkeley. And so the idea was we were going to introduce our connection practice magnetic boards and have the kids use these boards in the classroom so they could do all the steps that were right there on the boards. Okay, so we had a trainer go in and work with their teacher, and they got a great start to learning a connection practice. And then if you remember that basically at the end of February, everything started getting locked down, okay? And so all the schools had to go to distance learning. And so, of course, our teacher that we'd worked with at this school had to go to distance learning and basically thought, well, what can we do? I mean, you know, how are we going to teach this with all this COVID chaos and distance learning? However, at the end of the school year, the teacher of that 5th grade class contacted me and she said, you know, Rita Marie, I thought that this school year was going to be the worst ever because I got a cohort of kids that were known to be problems. These are kids, in her words, that felt entitled, they were out of control, plus they had kids that had known records of violence. She said, I really didn't know how I was going to get through this year. And that was at the beginning of the school year. She said, but I want to tell you that the connection practice has made it the best year ever, including the time during COVID, because by the time they got to distance learning, the class was already so connected. And she said, you know, out of all the classes in this elementary school, my class was the only one at the end of the year that had 100% attendance with distance learning. I don't know if you're aware how challenging it was for the schools and the teachers during distance learning, and she had 100% attendance to her class.
Right.
And she said it's all because we got completely connected.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, it was quite an example.
This would be something that would be great for all schools and organizations. Now, what organizations have you brought this to besides schools?
Okay, well, before we move on, I want to say one more thing about the school thing, because at the time we did the pilot with this school in Berkeley, we had the magnetic boards, which are the best in my opinion. However, it's very challenging to scale in a school system with magnetic boards, okay? Because you have to buy them and it's all these materials and so on. And so actually, because of COVID, we created digital boards that look just like the magnetic boards. So instead of moving magnets from one board to the other, you're just moving the words with your cursor. And so once we created the digital boards, and while schools were still having to have all the students wear their masks, we decided to do a pilot in another school that was in Gilroy, California. That's where I was living at the time. And so we did this pilot with a 5th grade class using the digital boards. The kids loved it. When our trainer would come into the classroom, they would cheer, yay, yay, And the most amazing thing is that because the school allowed us to put these digital boards on their laptops, they had them when they went home with their laptops.
Right.
And so several of them, when they came back from spring break, they said, oh, we had a fight in our family and I pulled out my boards and I taught my parents how to do the connection practice. This is how it can ripple out.
That is amazing. Yeah, I know a lot of schools have laptops, they have computers for the kids. That would be a really wonderful tool. Like I said, I took your course. I'll pull out the board and, work on some of my stuff, but my board is at my office. What about when I'm at home? What about when I'm with friends? Right?
Exactly.
A digital version could be very helpful. Very.
And this is how we're going to scale, Christy. Actually, what we're working on right now that I'm most excited about is that we have hired someone to create our global community online. And so what's going to happen with that community is that we can put these digital boards into any language in about 30 minutes. Okay, we've already got them in 5 languages. We've got them in Japanese, German, French, Spanish, and English. Anyway, so this global community platform is going to be a place where people all over the world can come and do a connection practice with a partner so that nobody has to be alone in whatever is troubling them. They'll be able to find someone who already knows the connection practice. In other words, to get into the community, you have to have learned the basic connection practice. But then when they arrive at this community platform, they can use their digital boards in any language and work with a partner to resolve their emotional turmoil. You see how that can ripple out and make a difference in our world where people all over the world are declining in their emotional intelligence. We can give it a big boost by not only giving them a really powerful method, but also giving them people to practice with in their own language.
Right. I think an app would be wonderful. An app that you could download and use on your mobile device.
We have that.
You do?
We actually have that. Yes, we have an app in the Apple Store.
Oh,
we do.
Connection.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm going to download that.
Yeah. Well, by the way, right now we are revising it. And so it's temporarily not available, just temporarily, because we're upgrading it. And we'll have that complete by May 20. So then you can go and find our app again in the Apple Store because we want to improve it. And so that's why it's out of availability for the moment.
Sure. Oh, what a wonderful idea. So yes, circling back, have you worked with organizations using this?
Well, we have over the years. Yes, I'm trying to think about how many, gosh, so many over the years. For example, we trained people, social workers and counselors who work with battered women in Dallas. Okay.
Yes.
And then also with an organization that deals with addiction. So we train their people. You know, there's a long list, but I'd like to actually speak to addiction for a moment because that's such a big issue in our world. So I have permission to share this example from our employee. Her name is CP, CIPI, which just happens to be the acronym for connection practice. You know, we call it the CP. Anyway, so yeah, so we had an employee, and she still works with us some, although she's now moving into her career, which makes me so happy. Anyway, when she first came to me, she had only about 2 months out of residential rehab for heroin addiction. Okay. And so she came to me and I hired her and she became our program manager over time. She learned the connection practice. And I'll never forget the first one she did. She had so much self-doubt coming out of this addiction, so much embarrassment, shame, you know, and feeling like I'm not normal. How am I going to fit back into life after being on the street as a heroin addict?
Wow.
And so anyway, she did this connection practice and I'll never forget her insight. It was like this light came on her face when she shared her insight. She said, "People believe in me."
Oh.
You know, and it was like she finally took it in that all these people that had helped her and her parents, you know, that had dealt with all this, they all believed in her and that I believed in her. She didn't get that until she did the connection practice and it worked on her unmet needs and then went into coherence. And then she asked for an insight and people believe in me. As a result of her learning the connection practice, then her mother got so excited about the connection practice. Her mother works at Stanford and her mother said their whole relationship, their mother-daughter relationship was horrendous before. And now because of the connection practice, they are in sync. They know how to work out any differences that come up. And so actually her mother, her name is Curie, she got me into Stanford. And now I'm teaching. When I go back to the United States, I offer workshops and so on at Stanford. So the connection practice can have a huge impact on addiction.
Right, absolutely. Because really, addiction is just the symptom. We need to address what the needs are underneath that are not
Exactly
met, that we try to fill with the addiction. So that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine that there would be organizations. I'm thinking of Google for some reason because they have that whole search inside yourself program. Employees to connect with themselves. But I can imagine how organizations could benefit from this, and especially in terms of mediation and problem resolution, you know, if it was the right company, that would be wonderful.
And well, by the way, we have worked with businesses. That's kind of, you know, you're alluding to that. Besides nonprofits that work with battered women or addiction, that we have brought the connection practice into business. We have some trainers who teach business people regularly. And, you know, I've taught a business once that the employees were unhappy with the name of their company. And the name was based on the names of the CEO's children. And they said, you know, this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to us. It doesn't mean anything to our customers. And anyway, so ultimately, by doing the connection practice together, they came up with a new name for their company, which was a company that helped get food to starving people. They connect the suppliers of the food with the nonprofit in the company that's distributing the food. So their job was to be a middleman in this very important work of getting food to starving people. And so they changed their name to Connects Us. By doing the connection practice, they came up with the name Connexus. Connexus.
The biggest testimonial I could think of.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
It's a great testimonial. That is wonderful. Now, what about governments? Can we please get this out to some of our governments? And not just,
yes, well,
I'm talking about city, local, state. Does this work in governments as well? Can you give any examples of working with governments?
Sure. Well, first I worked with our own city here in Costa Rica, where we trained some city employees, and we have some testimony about that in my book here. I'm not going to go into exactly what was said, But the other wonderful example is from when I lived in Gilroy, California. We worked with the South County Youth Task Force, which is a governmental agency. And so what we did is we trained the employees in how to use the connection practice in conjunction with restorative justice. Because what they were doing was they had young people in trouble. This was through the district attorney's office, this program. And so they train, and this is still going on, by the way. This is the juvenile diversion program where first they do the connection practice with these kids in trouble. And then these kids go to a restorative justice circle where they have to make amends to the person that they've hurt.
Oh, wow.
But the reason they do the connection practice first is if you take those kids into a restorative justice circle and they haven't really connected inside, and they haven't really gotten to any empathy for the person they hurt, then they're not emotionally ready to make amends.
Right.
So they do connection practice first, and then they go to the restorative justice circle. So that's the best example, I think, that we have of working with government so far.
Okay, that is so needed, not just for the teens. I'm thinking even for the prison system would be wonderful. No, this is great.
Absolutely.
So what are the next steps for the connection practice?
Well, we are really excited about this global community that we're building. And what we're in the process of doing, Christy, is scaling so we can reach millions. You know, I told you already that we've taught over 100,000, and that has been almost completely by word of mouth. It started with the school program in Costa Rica, where I had the governmental support here for that school program. But after that, it's spread by word of mouth around the world, and it's basically been taken from one person to the next, or a trainer teaching, 50 people or something like that. But we want to scale and help millions of people be able to resolve their own turmoil. And so what we're doing right now is working on automating. The courses that I teach will be recorded so that people can take those courses, and then they can go to our website and they can choose a coach to work with to do the experiential piece. So it's not dependent on me and my inner circle to teach this. So it's going to be automated, the learning part. And then after they've learned it, and after they've done the experiential piece with a coach, then they go to the global community to stay engaged and keep practicing and keep resolving their turmoil. So that's what we're excited about. We are in a huge automation process right now.
Yes, increasing that scale is so important. And
yes, and it's
scale.
Yeah, it's challenging, but we're well on our way to doing it. One of the fun things is that we have created a recording studio right here at our global headquarters so that I can record the courses and record videos and just do a lot to get our message out, because like I said, we've not had much marketing over the years, over 20 years, practically no marketing, and yet we've taught all these people. And just imagine once we get this automated and we get more videos going out through social media and other ways, that then we can help so many more people.
Right. 100,000 people and trainers, that's impressive. Then you think about the whole world.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Some scale could be appreciated. You've accomplished so much with this. I love that you're taking it to a bigger audience. You've accomplished quite a bit. You've gotten the book. So the title of your book is?
Completely Connected, Uniting Our Empathy and Insight for Extraordinary Results.
This book has won an award. What award is that?
It's a Nautilus Award. They have a contest called Better Books for a Better World. And so it won a Nautilus Award in the psychology category.
Oh, that's exciting. And you've also been nominated or named as one of the top rated nonprofits by Great Nonprofits. And then you have a Platinum Transparency 2024 award.
Yes.
That's exciting. So
yes, those are for our nonprofits. And then, one of the most surprising awards really was in October of 2024, so fairly recently, that Global Healthcare Magazine contacted me and said that I'd been identified as one of the 10 most promising women in global healthcare and wellness. And would it be okay if they did a story on me? And so I was amazed. And that was a wonderful honor. Yay, I'm grateful.
Yes.
But what I really was so excited about with that honor is that it's really pointing to that connection practice is one of the 10 most promising methods for global healthcare and wellness. It really wasn't about me. It's about the fact that we have a world screaming for an answer to how we can help all these people in our world who are suffering from emotional turmoil. What do we do about that? Well, here's a promising method. Here's something that can give us hope.
Absolutely. I think it can. And people can take this class. They can take your courses, find everything online at connectionpractice.org to find out about the courses and certifications, finding a coach or trainer, events, retreats, all of anything that you would need to know about this connection practice. It's, there are many steps, but it's not complicated. Right. It's easy to learn. Wonderful.
It is. And, can I just say, I'm word about our connection practice tours here in Costa Rica, because it's really my favorite thing to do, Christy, because we have people come here from all over. We've had South Koreans. We had 16 South Koreans. We have lots of Japanese coming. We have lots of US people. We just had somebody from Norway. We have people coming from all over the world to our global headquarters here in Costa Rica. So they come here and they learn the connection practice. We have 2 courses during the time they're here. And then we go to the best sites in Costa Rica. We go to a hot springs hotel. We have so much fun seeing the best sites in Costa Rica while practicing connection. And so it's an amazing experience because everybody gets so closely and authentically connected and feeling safe and that they matter. And we are immersed in nature, the beautiful nature of Costa Rica. So that's my favorite way to teach people the connection practice.
Wonderful. And that can be found at connectionpractice.org as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and explaining about this connection practice, about how empathy and insight helps us just achieve peace and connection. Thank you.
I enjoyed it so much, Christy. Thank you.
Don't know what to watch next? Decisions. Well, we've got some suggestions. You can click this little video here and watch that. It's something that we think you're going to like. If you like the last one, you're going to like that one too. You can also click on the subscribe button. And if you do that, then you'll get notifications whenever we have a new video up. Win-win, right?